Rue Sparks is my name. Go figure, it's in there. Um, actually started my career as an illustrator and graphic designer for advertising agencies, working on brands like Kellogg's and Lenovo, Gatorade at some point, Ulta, just basically everything I get my hands on. This slowly evolved into niching down into combining art and writing and sometimes comics in different ways. I'm currently disabled, and that actually kind of put a stop to my career. And for a while, I could not create art. So then that's when I started getting into the prose and integrating that together. So yeah, that's a bit of my background. Oh, and my pronouns are they, them. So let's go to Shane and then Ben.
Okay, sounds good. So my name's Shane. I, we've been doing Ben and I have actually been doing a YouTube show for the past year called Comic Book Squares, as you can tell by his background. So we use that show to promote independent comic book artists and their books and give them a platform to promote themselves. We wanted to find a way to give back to the community. In this last year. And as far as myself, my background is in video production. I've been doing that for 30 years and been lucky enough to work at Disney and Paramount Pictures and a few other fun places. So that was a good time. And yeah, so that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah.
What are your pronouns, Shane, by the way, just so
Oh,
we're
uh,
on the same page?
he, him.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, oh, and I'm Ben Rojek, he, him as well. So I was a photojournalist for a little over a decade, and then got into marketing and public relations and all that kind of stuff afterward. And then, that's where we met. I met Shane. Is that we were working at the same company? He was doing video production. I was doing marketing, and we had to be friends then. And then we decided we actually were friends. So. Uh, and then I was lucky enough last year that Shane, thought of me for the comic book squares, and here we are a year later, having interviewed people from all over the world, Syria, Ireland, Canada, all over the world. No, but we've interviewed people from all over, and comic creators from, that are producing television shows to ones who just had an idea during COVID and wanted to get started on it. So I feel very lucky that we get to, help out comic creators of every level promote themselves and get their work out there. Um, yeah, I love, and the thing is, like, I love Shane's passion for helping artists, get their art out there. I really do, man. Like, that's, and he keeps us on that path as a show, and I really appreciate that. So that's what we're all about.
It's awesome. I love seeing like podcasts and resources like what you're doing to help indie authors, indie artists kind of stand out because the market is very saturated. And it's very hard
Yeah,
for even readers to find the things that they want. So like having things like that is fantastic. So
yeah.
so let's see. We're still waiting on Sloan, so I think we'll go ahead and start the first question and then we'll just bring them in if they decide to pop in. Um, so we're going to start with like the meat of of what this panel is about. And so what is your definition of what a comic is? And are you stringent on that definition or are you like they're more guidelines? Let's go ahead and I'll go last. Let's start with Shane.
Well, it's an interesting question because the medium is so wide. I guess for me, as long as there's illustration and actually that's a tough one because I wanted to say illustration with dialogue, but we've done books where it's just illustration, right? And they tell the story just visually, which is really a super fun way. I love those kind of books. Boy, what is a comic book? Because then you get into the question of what is children's literature, because those have illustrations and dialogue and story as well. Um, I guess for me, I'd have to whittle it down to I guess panel-based storytelling. That's something that you don't get in children's literature. They're generally a solid page or goes over the breadth of the entire 2 pages. Where that's the one thing that's kind of unique about comic books is the sequential panel based storytelling, almost like a storyboard, really. And that's what I think is really fun about comic books too, is being a film person and loving film, it's almost like kind of watching storyboards a lot of times. If they're done really well, it's like you're watching a motion picture. So yeah, I would say sequential based panels. That would have to be my definition.
Awesome. Let's go to bed.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree there. And what's crazy about that though is so you have these subgenres, right, of like graphic novels, web comics, manga, and so I would almost use comic as kind of an umbrella term to cover those, a sequential storytelling. Obviously, depending on the art style or how that sequential storytelling is done, does differentiate it into the different subgenres. So, like if it's a one shot, 80-page sequential storytelling, that's a graphic novel. If it's done in the traditional style of manga, that's a manga. Webcomic, for the most part, is you keep scrolling down so the panels are one on top of the other. So I still feel like each of those fall under the umbrella of a comic book to me.
Awesome. I do like the idea of like an umbrella term. For me, it comes down as much to the intent as much as the media. I feel like most of the time, when you come down to it, a comic's trying to tell a story. And it could be one panel, it could be 200 pages, but the point is to tell a story. And like you said, Shane, not all comics include dialogue. The one I think of offhand is The Arrival by Sean. I literally have it here, Sean Tan. And it's just a regular size comic or graphic novel, but there is no dialogue in it.
Mhm.
There's not even any text. The text that is within it is completely made up. And
Mhm.
it's a beautiful comic and it tells an amazing story, no text.
Mhm.
So I really think it comes down to like what are you trying to do with it? And I like the umbrella term because it gives you room to break the rules. I feel like having that set of guidelines when you first start creating comics is helpful, but at some point you have to push the bounds. And that's where you get some amazing work is things that may not even traditionally be considered comics, but they understand like the inherent purpose of it and they understand what tools to be used when, even if it goes against traditional standards. So that's the long and short of it for me.
I like that.
um, so
I've
any comments on it? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so speaking of non-traditional, we're trying to break the rules there. We were lucky enough to interview a young creator, Anas Abdullah. He's from Syria, and he had created one of his first comics, Eleutheramia. I'm probably mispronouncing it. It was, but it was basically a poem, and
Mhm.
it was two poems, so the comic was in two parts, and there was the sequential artwork, but it just followed his poem. So the poem and the art tied together to tell this story about trying to break free from the chains of your past, trying to rebirth yourself as a new person despite the trauma of your past and childhood. And it was a beautiful, beautiful poem and story, but it wasn't your traditional comic book, right? No dialogue and all that. It was black and white and very ethereal artwork. But I still would consider that a comic because that's what Anas said it was, right? So to your point, it's the intent as well.
Yeah, I've seen some beautiful. poetry slash comics that it feels like there's two stories happening at the same time. There's the lyrical narrative of the poem, and but then there's the visuals, and they don't necessarily have to be like one-to-one connection. You can have two stories that are connecting at the same time, and I've seen some beautiful work like that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
you'll have to link to that, or write it in the chat
Yes.
for us to check out.
Yes, he in fact Anas just did a second book of the same kind of style called Atheres. And it's about the afterlife, but it's again a poem told with sequential artwork. And I think that was picked up by Source Point Press, the publisher.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next question. Now that we've kind of set a sort of definition, I feel like we're all kind of on the same page where there's not like a great, like concrete definition. But what is an example of comic that you think exemplifies the medium as it was traditionally, maybe not traditionally, but more commonly accepted? Um, and maybe I'll go first with this one, give you an
Mm.
example. So one they're an artist actually that comes to mind, and everyone knows Fiona Staples from Saga, but I actually know her previously from two comics, North 40 and the Mystery Society, and these were more self-contained than Saga. Saga is like a very long series of graphic novels. These were just like one book each, but for one, they are a complete master of panels and where the dialogue goes all of that, but also the places where there is no dialogue, no text, and you can still see where the story is going, you still see the action, you still understand what's going on. They do a fantastic job. So I would say, like for today, like Fiona Staples is like the standard industry standard for me. So, Shane,
Okay.
Oh, well, that's a tough one. Put me on the spot. As far as far that's a lot of pressure to put on one book to be the standard of where comics are at. You
maybe
know,
not standard, but
yeah,
like where, like the guideline, I guess.
yeah. Well, you know, the tough thing is for me. Well, okay, I'm going to take a step back here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more kind of esoteric in the sense that art to me very much embodies who you are in a very particular moment and where you're at age wise, where you're at in your life, where you're at mentally. We're all growing and changing. And so art can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And art can change over time. That's the beautiful thing about art. Like you can look at a piece of art when you're 10 years old and look at it in a particular way. And then, maybe you look at it when you're 25 or 30 and go, maybe I saw something different when I was 10. And so with that said, for me, my strongest connection to art is when I was in that 13, 14-year age bracket. And so I'm going to, give up my age here, but that's kind of like in the John Byrne X-Men era. And for me, those are like that's the epitome of what comic books were. And with that said, the art connected with me in a way because those were times when I would be able to go to like the 7-Eleven or whatever and see comics on a spinny rack, back in the day. And there was I was drawn to those bright colors and those characters. And so yeah, for me, and that still resonates with me today. I mean, I love all the new art and we get a chance to meet these artists on our show. It's absolutely fantastic, and I love to see the really interesting stuff they're doing with it and pushing the art in different directions. But for me, it goes back to that what initially got me excited about comic books.
Great. Yeah, the
Yeah.
nostalgia factor is so real.
Yep. Yep.
All right, Ben.
Um, so okay, I'm gonna go in a different direction here and looking at what I think makes for a great like a comic to me that like what comics can be, right? Not necessarily what the standards, but like the standard of what they can be. And that to me is currently James Tinian and Martin Simmons' Department of Truth. Um, Now the storytelling aside, well, not aside because that's a huge part of it. And James Tinian's an amazing writer, but so between the story and the artwork, to me, it's like this is what comics could be. And it actually reignited my love for comics again. Seeing Martin Simmons' artwork and all that he included, because it's, he does like, paintings and multimedia and all this stuff. And so each page is just so rich with things to look at and to take in. And the art is as much, and we've talked about this, a minute ago, but the art is just as much telling the story as Tinian's, dialogue and other word boxes and stuff. In fact, sometimes the art is telling you parts of the story that you aren't reading, right? You get even deeper there. I've seen that even in uh oh man, Starhenge by Liam Sharp. His artwork too is just so rich and deep, and there's so much detail and little hidden things in there that I feel like that to me is what comics can be, and that's the standard that they should be. That's the balance of the writing and the artist there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so wonderful when the art isn't just an accompaniment to what's going on with the story, but it's like its own, like you get like almost Easter eggs or things you wouldn't have gotten from the
Yeah.
dialogue at the same time. It's great.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love finding those little hidden nuggets, or if you haven't checked out Department of Truth, Martin Simmons' artwork is just, oh, it's mind blowing. It's so good.
Shane?
Yeah, I'll just tag on to that. Like you said, when the art and the story are able to help each other and tell different parts of the story, I would say take that even further. And there's other members of the team. When the colorist steps up to the game and really brings another level, to the art. And on top of that, the lettering. We've reviewed some books where the lettering. What we did a book. Oh my gosh, that book! I still think about it today. You know which one I'm talking about, Ben? Is Pop Star Assassin. That book
Yeah.
is absolutely bananas. And there is a full page of just text that like swirls around, and you like have to turn the book. And I think it was done. I want to believe it's done intentionally to like draw you into this weird spiral down of madness that happens, and that so that that other artist, the person who's doing the lettering, also contributed to this piece of art that was a multitude of people that came together to bring this thing to life. It's like a motion picture, when you have the actors on camera and the cinematographer and the editor, like all these different people have to come together to make this piece of art.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, that I feel like we're definitely getting to the point where we're pushing the bounds, and that while it does make this question a little difficult, it's just, I mean, it's where art needs to go. If we're in stasis, we're dying. So,
Yeah.
um, so that leads us to the next question, which is kind of the polar opposite. Let's see. What is an example of a comic that defies either your definition or the traditional definition, but you feel is an exception to the rule? So it does things that may be considered like you don't do that, or it defies the guidelines, but is definitely a comic and an exemplary comic, basically. So if do you want to
Hmm.
start, Shane, or do you need me to give an example?
Yeah, give me an example of what you're going for with this one. I mean, I have an idea in my head of
Yeah.
one, but go for it.
So I feel like there's definitely two paths that this can go down. Web comics, online comics, they almost follow different rules. In a lot of ways, they do. One that has been around for quite a while that it's simple, but it's complex at the same time is Scandinavia and the world. If you know what Hitalia is, it borrows that concept, but instead of it just being ridiculousness, it speaks to a lot of current events, and it's oriented through the Scandinavian countries, although America and other countries make an appearance. Um, but the fantastic part of it is you have like this very long series of panels. It's all vertical. You get to the end, and then there's a history lesson in it. Like
Mm.
they explain like what the mythology is in Scandinavia and these other countries and how it relates to modern things. So it's teaching you, but you're enjoying it and laughing at the same time. And the format is completely different from what you would see in a graphic novel. And this isn't the only comic that has done this, but it's definitely technique that you would not see in print books 20 years, 30 years ago.
Mm,
Um, and then another example, if it's been a while since I read it, but I think it's the Unwritten, that it not only included like traditional comic with dialogue and panels, illustrations, it also integrated like emails and articles. And I know there's a name for it, but I can't remember off the top of my head. So it's combining this technique that's used in writing and prose with a visual translation of it, where you use news articles or TV things. Oh, there's a word for it. I can't remember what it is.
mm.
But yeah, so it's taking modern things and basically retrofitting it for the comic genre. So yeah,
Interesting.
those are my
Well, somebody just threw a question in the chat there.
yes, epistolary. You're right. You got it. Thank you.
Nice.
I can never remember that word.
Well, I'm okay. There's a book that we did a review for, and we actually I think mentioned in our last panel. So I'll let Ben have that if he wants it, because I'm going to go in a completely different direction. And what the direction I'm going to go is probably controversial. Wi- but it's happening and we can't stop it, and it's something that we probably need to talk about. And I definitely will look at it from a different perspective. Okay, so there's the setup, and what I'm going to talk about is AI generated art. Yeah, you knew
Knew
where I
that
was
was
going
gonna
to
be.
go.
I knew
Yep.
where you're going.
And here's the thing. I totally understand artists who are, angry about it or fearful of it or whatever. Um, but here I want to look at it from a different perspective, in that there's a lot of people in the world who have ideas and haven't been able to get them out in a way that they're satisfied with. And now here's this tool that's a new tool that allows them to express themselves. And I think any art that you bring into the world, whatever medium that you choose to do it, whether it's traditional drawing or painting or that art can be in the form of music or film or anything. As long as you're able to express yourself and get it out there, I think it's exciting. And at this point, the cat's already out of the bag. We can't put it back in. It's already there. Midjourney's not going to get shut down tomorrow. So you have to either learn to embrace it, or just go hide in a corner. So I'm excited to see where things go with it. I've been paying attention to the space, and I totally respect other artists and their opinion of it. But in a lot of ways, those are the same opinions that happened when photography came out. And then, traditional painters were like, "Ugh, you just snap a picture. You're not a real artist." And then over the years, those people have been accepted into their own art form. And, for all we know, 15 years from now, people that are making prompts, that might be their form of, that's almost like their form of coding. It's much easier, obviously, than traditional computer coding, but I've been playing around with it, and finding the right prompt and generating things does take time and effort, and there is a certain skill to it. So yeah, a little bit controversial, but I'm excited to see anybody that can bring art into the world. I'm happy about.
Ben.
What comic were you letting me talk about,
The
Shane?
the the flea.
Oh yeah, yeah, I was gonna talk. That's
See,
so funny.
that's we're on the same page.
So talking about books that kind of break the norm of what a comic is or could be. Um, there's an artist, and actually she's a chocolatier too, G.E. Gallus, and she's created a couple of web comics. One called The Flea, the other called The Plague and Dr. Kane, and she based these comics on old English, it's like some old English poets and some of their poetry, and then turned it into these kind of horror stories using some of their poetry. And it's so interesting because she includes their poetry throughout and then makes them almost these like grotesque horror stories. It was very exciting to read because it was a awesome juxtaposition there of old poetry and then her art style. So really love that. I think that's you can find her stuff online. I think that breaks the norm. And then I'll go back to Anosopteryx theories and eleutheromania, and in his utilization of poetry and the artwork. And he's one of the things I think he's really good at is finding the right artists for the piece. In fact, in his first book, he had two different artists because one was told in one half of the poem was in a desert landscape, and the other half was more talking about the rebirth, and it was set in space and was very reminiscent of 2001: A Space Odyssey. So um, I love seeing these, and I'm bringing those up, even though they aren't like a Marvel or DC book or whatever. I still feel like indie creators are the ones who are really getting in there and breaking the mold because they only have themselves to answer to. They're the one they're able to just go out and create art just because they love it, and that's they have this vision and they make it come true. So they're not beholden to their to corporations or anything just yet. So it's exciting. I think that's what's one of the exciting things about us doing our show is we get to see some just amazing new takes on what comics can be.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Before we go to the next question, I'm just gonna touch a bit on something Shane talked about. Now, I don't want to go into like a 20-minute debate over AI, but just so we have two perspectives, I'm coming from having done coding, having done writing, having done art, and in the past 6 months, we've seen quite a few lawsuits. For one, DeviantArt is
Mhm.
being sued because they provided their whole user database against their own user guidelines for Stable Diffusion. And I think if you think back to, I think all of us were there when MP3s started becoming a thing, and it was the time of Napster. And even though things like Spotify and Apple Music aren't a perfect solution, it was a way to head off some piracy. And I can see that there is a way for us to create ethical AI databases, even if it's like the same way as we currently are licensing art for stock photos. And the problem is you cannot reliably get your artwork removed. And that's the biggest issue I see here. And as an example of how this is negatively impacting also publishers, I can't remember which one it was, but there was a publisher, they got 500 submissions of AI art compared to the 700 of normal submissions for 1 month, and they had to shut them down. So I don't think we're seeing the end of the legal battle of this, and I don't think we know where it's going to go at this point. But yeah, I'm always pushing for ethical usage. So yeah, Shane.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just like you said, we could probably talk
Yeah.
about this for the next the remainder of our time. I'll just say real quickly,
Yeah.
yeah. So Adobe obviously just came out with their Firefly, and they're trying to address
Mhm.
that by only sourcing from their stock library that they had paid licensors or artists for, and they're trying to give them funds based on if the art was generated off of something that they had created. So yeah, there's the space is moving so fast. I
Yeah.
mean, it's only been since November that
Yeah.
Midjourney was released. And here, I actually just watched a video yesterday from a photographer, and he was it was kind of funny because he's a little crotchety, kind of like me a little bit. And so he was like, he his take was that you could tell from the video that he really hated stock library companies and how they take advantage of photographers. So he was like, good, stick it to him. And so his perspective was, a little bit different, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's an interesting time, and it's exciting, and I'm curious to see where it all goes. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just interesting topics, interesting topics.
Yeah, we have there's so much time before we're going to establish like rules and
Mm,
laws around this. It's so new right now.
yep.
So it's hard to say like what it. I will mention if you are an artist, if you have not heard of this yet, there is a free app called Glaze. And this you can apply to any artwork you're going to put online, and it will overlay a nearly transparent additional image, and this
Mm.
prevents your artwork from being used in Stable Diffusion or anything. So it's free to use. It takes like depending on the size of the image, it can take a little bit for it to actually create the image, but if you're going to be putting your artwork out there, it's definitely worth it.
Mm.
So,
Cool.
okay, back on topic. I knew that was going to come up sometime during this convention. I just knew it. Okay. So we did touch on this a little bit before, but what has been your experience with gatekeeping in comics and art, and how has this influenced your beliefs on what makes a comic a comic? So I
Gatekeeping.
will start with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this. So I come from actually going to school for illustration, and it was very interesting the drama you have at an art school. So there were 7 floors. This is at Kendall College of Art and Design, and the illustration to floor was the 7th floor. And I think the fine art was like the fourth or so. And it was always fascinating when the fine artist would come up to illustration floor for like a watercolor class or anything, and you would hear these comments like, illustration isn't real art, and you're all sellouts. And I feel that this can very much translate to any sort of medium when we're gatekeeping what is and is not a particular media. Um, so yeah, that's probably why I'm a little bit more open to what is and is not a comic. It's because I've seen how people can double down on things that are inherently irrelevant. So,
Mm.
Shane?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know necessarily that I've experienced that. I know that when, my family and I, we go to our local comic book convention every year, and that's just one of the things I absolutely look forward to every year. And just being immersed in art from all different forms, whether it's, people making, bracelets to 3D printed things to drawings to, written novels, every piece of art that you can think of. And the cosplay, within the last, 10 years has just been amazing. So, I don't get a sense of that from any gatekeepers at the comic book convention, and that I don't. Maybe I'm just not paying enough attention, or the inner bickering that happens, once the before the show opens or after the doors close to the general public, and these artists, go at each other about what's real and what isn't. But in my what I like to believe and what I love so much about being in those environments is actually it's the sense of everybody's accepted. I feel like for that 3 days, I'm going to get uh, emotional here, but for that 3 days, I feel like that's like the world I wish we lived in. Like when I see, a special needs, kid and they're dressed up as, Professor Xavier and people are like taking pictures with them, I'm gonna get emotional. Like that is the world I wish we could live in all the time. Like people just accepting everybody as being human beings. And yeah, so so I don't necessarily feel like I see any this is one thing and this isn't. Maybe it happens and I'm just blind to it.
You lucked out, I think.
I guess
Not
I
a bad
did.
thing. Right, Ben?
Um, so just coming from it from our perspective of doing the show, having spoken to some of these creators, yeah, I feel like there is some especially when you get into subgenres like web comics, right? I feel like unfortunately some people like turn their nose down at web comics and or nose up, sorry, at web comics, like that's not a real comic book because you're not doing it in the pan, it's not traditional, whatever. But the thing is, I've read, I'm on I write reviews also for Shane and I both write reviews for Global Comics, and I'm on there and I'm reading all sorts of different kinds, even the web comics, and they're just as great storytelling. If you can just look at it as, scrolling down, so through all the panels, one on top of the other, it's a different way of reading it. Um, but I've seen beyond the indie comics Twitter and stuff, those conversations and people, again, turning their nose up at web comics, for example, or you look at the different publishers, and thankfully there are publishers like like Source Point Press, for example, or a few others who will take a chance on some avant-garde or some experimental comic storytelling. And I bring them up because they published. I keep bringing them up because I really like the guy and I love the story of Anas. They picked up Atheres, his second book, or I think it's his third book. But they picked up Atheres and are publishing that, even though it's a poem and it's just this. Again, it's a poetry about death and life and all that, and they published it. But no, I can't think of any other publisher who would have done that. And that's why you have all these comic creators going on Kickstarter these days, because they want to be able to tell the stories they want. And it's so if there is any at that point, if there is any gatekeeping, that's on the publisher side, who just they're looking for what's going to make money, what's going to sell, not necessarily what is artistically relevant or has a great story to tell.
Shane?
Well, I mean, we could bring it all the way back to what I just talked about. I mean, right there, we have a prime example of the AI, and there's that, what is real and what isn't, considered art. And obviously, right now, the entire art community is like on the negative of this is horrible and we should get rid of it. And so, I mean, there's a pretty clear example.
It's interesting. I really liked what you said earlier, Ben, about the umbrella term, because like that does allow for people to go in different paths for what fits. Like you said with web comics, a lot of people are reading it on their phone, so they're going to be scrolling. They're not necessarily going to be horizontal, so it makes sense for it to be that way.
Mhm.
And also to your point, Shane, about the AI, it's interesting because I've heard from another creator. They actually created an AI where the database was the artwork of the person paying them. So they're able to take their own database of artwork and then create additional artwork based off that. And I
Mm.
think that's a fantastic use of AI. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I hope that we can evolve to the point where it's ethical, because I do think there are opportunities for this to be used. I think I mentioned on Discord, there's the library thing that they just released this
Mm.
part of their app where you can search for a book based off, like, I think it was blue, and find it. So there's some great uses of these technologies. We just have to find our way to it. But
Yep.
yeah, when webcomics came out, it was definitely like, that's not like real art. And I feel like there's, like you said, been some vestiges of that. So
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard it still a little bit on social media, um, but man, I mean, it's disappointing because there's some great stories out there, and people just like you said, open their minds and open their phones and try to read it like it's meant to be read. Perhaps they would see that there's some great stories and artwork out there in webcomics as well.
And I think the advantage of webcomics too is that it's integrated so seamlessly into things we already do. So you see the webcomics that are being posted to social media, there may be a couple panels, and you see it in your day to day versus having to sit down and read a comic. So it is the same medium, but at the same time, it's not. It serves a slightly different purpose. So
Mhm.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll get to if anyone has anything for Q&A. We actually answered the other one, but this is, how do marginalized voices and non-Western storytelling and art ideals fit into the future of comics? So we're at a point in the world, in our world, where, I mean, the internet is a thing. You can access all these perspectives from different areas of the world all the time, and that means that our world is becoming smaller. I don't see that as a bad thing, but how do we allow that diversity and marginalized voices in the comics industry, traditional and indie? That was a big question.
That is a big question. Um, well, I mean, I'll jump in if that's okay, Ben.
Yeah.
My feeling is there really isn't any restriction. I mean, that's the amazing thing about the internet, is that you can reach anybody in the world with your art. You could just simply post it on Instagram or any other social, and you can find an audience. So I think that's the exciting thing is all voices can be heard. Um, at the same time, the internet can also be a dark, uncomfortable place, and certain people of certain voices tend to rise and make a lot of trouble. So I think we just need more of the positive voices to offset the negative voices. So I'd like to see even more of it. You know, more people put their art into the world. And I understand putting your art out there can be very scary. You're opening yourself up. A lot of these stories that are being told are personal stories, and that can be scary to open yourself up. So I get that and I respect that. The only thing I would say to that is, you know, the only way that we can move forward and be better and change is to hear more of that.
Okay. Ben?
Yeah. Can you repeat the original question just a little bit?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was listening to Shane and then
I
I
mean,
yeah.
essentially, where do marginalized voices and non-Western storytelling ideals, like how do they fit in comics as we go forward?
Yeah. Um, so I what's exciting is I think crowdfunding has allowed for marginalized voices to get their stories made without having to wait for the traditional gatekeepers of the publishers to accept their stories, right? So we're seeing more and more, and it's funny because when we started our show was post-pandemic, and a lot of the creators we were talking to was during the pandemic, whether they, you know, unfortunately that they lost their job or they're just on a hiatus or whatever. They're like, I've had this kind of comic book story in my head for years. I want to tell a story about, you know, my culture, or I want to tell a story that, you know, I see myself in it, or, you know, my kids can see themselves in it. And people went out and started creating it. And you have this, like, I'm trying not to use the word lightly, but this renaissance of comic book storytelling with you know, everybody joining the crowdfunding scene and getting their comics made. What's really cool too is a lot of these I've seen a lot of new publishers pop up because again, people, you know, from traditionally marginalized groups, they you know, are like, I'm not going to wait, and which is great. They're like, I'm not going to wait for a traditional publisher to pick up the story idea I had. I'm going to create my own publishing company, tell my stories, and let other people you know, from these groups tell their stories as well. And so we've been seeing more and more of that, and it's exciting. We, you know, one of the things that we do for our show is back crowdfunded comics as well. So, you know, we put the word out there, and I specifically, you know, I don't say it on our socials, but well, now I'm saying it out to the world. Like I often look for comics that are coming from, you know, traditionally marginalized groups because they, I feel like they need the boost. You know, I want to make sure that I'm helping boost what they're trying to do and get their comics made and get their voices out there. I think that's important as, you know, somebody you know, like cis white, you know, a cisgendered, you know, white male, you know, 40 something male. Like, I think it's important for me to do my part to help other voices, you know, have a turn. And so I you know, look for those and try to back them. So it's exciting to see all these new publishers and the crowdfunding, and I feel like through those and through the successes of those crowdfunded comics, we are starting to see the let's say the big two pick up more. You know, we interviewed a gentleman named Jordan Clark. He wrote Red Son. He's written for Star Wars comics and stuff like that. And you know, he got to write for I think it was oh man, I'm sorry, like DC. It was DC had a series for BIPOC creators, and he got to write, you know, as part of that series. And so you just see more and more of these things where you know, they're picking up these creators because of them going out and making stuff on their own. They're proving that there is a market for this. It goes back to what I said earlier in the gatekeeping, and you know, the especially with the big two, it's like, are we going to be able to make money off of it? It's not necessarily
Yeah.
like, is this the right thing to do, or is this a great story? It's like, are we going to be able to make money off of it? So, I think now that they're seeing that, they're actually picking up a lot more of these creators. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that that continues and we get more of these diverse voices. And it's so cool. I was just telling in between our sessions, I was telling my friends about this comic I read, and it's just coming out. It's called Death Drop Drag Assassin, and it's picked up by Mad Cave Studios, and it's about a drag queen who was a former assassin who now has to go, and these drag queens are being from where she performs, or disappearing, and she doesn't want to get sucked in until it's a friend of hers, and then she decides to bring back her assassin ways and go and hunt down whoever's doing this. It's friggin' amazing. And but what I'm getting at is like now it's like you're seeing these stories be told that are like friggin' awesome, and years ago you might not have. So I'm so excited for the new storytelling we're getting to see.
And yeah, I'm just gonna respond real quick, and then Cody had a question, so just get ready. They are asking, what are some of your favorite non-traditional comics? So think about it while I answer. So for me, as someone who's kind of at the intersection, a lot of marginalized identities, I see that there are these marginalized creators putting themselves out there, and it feels like you need lightning in a bottle to get seen. And I think that's why it's so important to have the comic book squares that you're doing and things that go out of their way to find these marginalized creators and highlight them, because it is saturated. The disadvantage of having access to pretty much everyone everywhere at every time is that it can be hard to be seen, especially
Mhm.
being marginalized, where a good portion of the population doesn't really want to hear from you. So I think the best thing we could do is continue to go out of our way to find these people who are creating things that are just different than the cis white hetero narratives. So
Been reading
yeah,
that for
and
years.
yeah. So
Sorry.
I keep doing what you're doing. We need more people like that. So what is your some of your favorite non-traditional comics, Shane?
Well, I actually answered it in the chat here while Ben was talking. She had
Oh,
asked, or they had asked about non-dialogue specific. And as it turns out, I had just done a review for Global Comics for a book last week, and it was a book that had three short stories in it, all by an artist named Wesley Griffith. And one of them in the middle was a non-dialogue piece. And in my review, I'll be honest, maybe it just went over my head, but I don't know that I got 100% of the story. I get the overall gist of it, but the artwork was really cool, and I was just completely blown away by Wesley Griffith. I mean, in my written review, I said I have to find more work by this person because I have to assume that this person did all the artwork and all the writing because theirs is the only name that's on the book, and it's each story is completely different art style, like, and so that's what blew me away. So yeah, I mean that's a very recent piece. I have another one too, but I can't find it.
if you think
It
of
was a
it,
while.
put it in the chat before
Yeah,
we
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
Then Ben.
Oh man, I'm trying not to keep repeating myself on this, but because we've been talking about like the fringes of what a comic could be, and so I've kind of named a few of some of my favorites. Theories being one, uh, um, and the Flea. Oh my gosh, that was a creepy story, but it was like based on a Walt Whitman poem, I think, or something, or was it E. E. It was
Hmm.
but then and then GE took it and made it a horror story. It was crazy. So,
That's
uh,
lovely.
yeah, yeah, it's just, it's so fun to see those. Actually, one I'm reading right now, and it's a web comic, is called The Space Between. It's on Global Comics as well, and it's about a couple of aliens. It looks cartoony and all that stuff, but I'm gonna say it's non-traditional again because it goes back to being a web comic and all that. We get like a panel every few days via Global Comics, and the creators are non-binary, and those are incorporated into the story as well. And it's just with the aliens and all, it's a really funny, I don't know, it's funny and mystery and all that. So it's hard to say that's totally non-traditional because of the artwork and everything, but the way that they present the story is a little non-traditional to me. So the space between is one, and then the flea, and then Atheres. I think those are my
Awesome.
three right now.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you could stick with some comic traditions and then just push the envelope in other
Yeah,
ways. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
I
Because it
always come
started
back
off
to
like,
the
oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
it started off seeming like a Saturday morning cartoon, the comic did, and then quickly got, crazier and more, a little darker here and there. So it was a cool way to do this web comic. So yeah, that's why I mentioned that one.
Awesome. And I just stick with the Arrival, like that comic. It's and I'm a person that loves speculative elements too. So having like the fantastical parts of it, I love it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna finish up. Before we leave, do you have a site, social media, or any place you would like people to head off if they want to hear more from you? Shane?
Well, yeah, actually, we've got our show on YouTube, Comic Book Squares, and it's also audio podcast. What's the address for that, Ben?
Well, they can just if you head over to Spotify, that's the easiest
Spotify.
way to find it. Spotify or Apple the Apple Podcasts, and just search Comic Book Squares. We'll be the only one that that pops up for that.
There you
Yeah,
go.
don't have the web address for that, but yeah, in the Shane put, we're also on YouTube, and we just launched a Substack. So we do a weekly newsletter. It's robust. It's not just like an update. We do interviews with comic creators, reviews of comics, and then we have a crowd-funded comic recommendation section. So we allow submissions for that to our email, comicbooksquares@gmail.com.
Fantastic, thank you. I actually going to be doing a reading of some poetry and short stories on the top of the hour, so if you want to check it out, I will be there. Otherwise, I am Rue Sparks everywhere, except for Instagram, where it's rue.sparks. And you can just find my stuff at ruesparks.com. So thank you, Shane. Thank you, Ben. And thank you, everyone who attended. We ran over a little bit, but yeah, have a fantastic rest of the convention. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.